saying that not saved and go to heaven because believing that book rather than that of the text of the Bible or Torah.
Right. When you read the Quran and when you read the New Testament, you will see that there are a lot of similarities. But there are also some fundamental contradictions. Repeatedly in the Quran, Muhammad says, Jesus is not God. Repeatedly in the New Testament, we read, Jesus is God.
So how do you determine which is true?
Well, by reading them closely and examining how did Muhammad live? What did Muhammad teach? How did Jesus treat people? What did Jesus teach? First reason I believe in Christ is because his teachings demand respect. But there have been a lot of people who've taught great teachings. A lot of people. So I'm not going to just believe in Jesus because he taught some good teachings. Second point, though, is I examine his lifestyle. And I notice that not only did he teach this incredibly high ethical standard, he lived up to it. He was no hypocrite. He displayed tremendous moral power in living up to this amazingly high ethical standard. John chapter 8, he could look into the faces of his enemies and say, which one of you can prove me guilty of sin? His enemies were silent. 1 John chapter 3, John, who lived with Christ intimately, could say, in him is no sin. You can talk to every one of my friends. You can talk to my wife and my children. All of them will tell you, Cliff is a sinner. Meaning by that, Cliff knows what's good. At times he does it, but at other times he does not do it. I am a sinner. Christ was not.
So he was consistent with what he preached, but that doesn't mean reliability of the actual historical evidence of that teaching.
That's a different issue. We'll get to that. The third reason that I trust in him is because at the moment of his most excruciating pain, when he's nailed to a wooden crossbeam, instead of cursing his enemies the way I probably would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And the fourth and final reason that I trust him is because 3 days after he died, he physically, bodily rose from the dead.
Allegedly.
That makes it a no-brainer for me. If he rose from the dead, I think it's really clear, isn't it? He is reliable. You can trust him.
But that's, again, based on the reliability of the actual man.
Exactly. Okay. So now we'll move to the next question, right? Which is?
The historical facts that we're talking.
You bet. Why do you trust the Gospels to give you accurate historical information about Jesus?
Well, there's a lot of consensus and it's consistent. But again, the same thing can be said of the Quran and a lot of... Now, not that Muhammad's consistent in his lifestyle. He went from a violent warlord to very peaceful. But I'm saying the consistency of both documents are pretty...
Exactly. That's why I stand out here and say, I can get an accurate picture of Muhammad by reading the Quran. Because the evidence is the Quran is a very reliable book historically.
Which says that Jesus was not the prophet.
Exactly. And I can get a very accurate picture of what Siddhartha Gautama Buddha taught. Because the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha have been carefully preserved. So I start now to read them and compare. How did Buddha live? What was his thinking about how to solve the problems of life? What did Muhammad say? How did he live? What did he say is the solution? And the same with Jesus.
Doesn't that make you kind of see that the real thing is our humanity? We all recognize that we need to live moral, good lives, that there probably is something greater than us, but that we can't stick to one uniform idea of that, because that's what leads to oppression, heads getting cut off, women getting suppressed, people living their lives based on rules that were made 2,000 years ago. When I think the general consensus, even amongst atheists, is we're part of a bigger thing that we can call God or we could call a Big Bang back then, but to pick one above the others when all of them seem valid and they're right, it just seems, one might say ethnocentric, or one might say just deciding that one is above the others without the reason for that. I just don't see the reason why the Torah or why the Quran is less respected by you, I guess. Why Jesus is Jesus is God, Muhammad's not the prophet. I mean, Jesus was more moral, but it seems like we're all getting the big picture. Buddha, Islam, Christianity, you're just deciding one is superior. I'm just wondering where the evidence is for that.
I am not deciding that one is superior. They all make truth claims. At times, the truth claims agree. At other times, the truth claims contradict each other. The law of non-contradiction works 100 times out of 100 when it comes to determining reality. A and non-A cannot both be true in the same way at the same time. They contradict each other. We look for evidence of reliability, and then we make a commitment. A follower of Jesus Christ is someone who has looked at the evidence that Christ is reliable. They've looked at the other options that they have seriously considered, be it materialism, hedonism, narcissism, rationalism, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, whatever the options are that they've seriously considered. And then they make a decision based on the evidence of Christ's credibility, his reliability. I'm going to put my faith in him. And we all do that. So that is why, and guess what, sir? That's why for the past 32 years I've been speaking on university campuses. When people have pressed me hard about, why Jesus, and I answer them. But then I begin to realize, we're just going around in a circle here. We're just beating a dead horse. I just have 2 questions, and I'd like to fire those questions at you. I understand you don't believe in Jesus because there's not enough evidence that he's reliable. So, what or who are you living for? And what is the evidence that whoever and whatever you're living for is reliable?
Well, like my empirical experience, it leads me to believe there is a God, just that there are too many small miracles in the world for it to not be engineered. But that's just my take on it. I like to live a moral life. And it seems like, you've adopted Christ because you think that's the best way to live a moral life and a life of faith as your connection to God. And that's great. But for me, I believe Jesus he existed. It's just that if we're going to be going as far as qualify him as God, that's where I have trouble. Just because I didn't have the luxury of seeing him rise from the dead. I have enough skepticism to question history just in general. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think that, the way you probably want to live your life is very similar to mine. I want to live a good life, recognize that I'm a very small, insignificant part of everything I'm around, and live for what I call God, to live up to a good standard. And I think we all want to do that. And I think you chose to adopt Christianity because you think that's the greatest manifestation of an organized faith to live that kind of life. And I think that's great. I don't think you're fanatical at all. I just, my ability to have faith that Jesus is God, that's where I struggle because.
You bet. And I understand that's a struggle. I have no problem understanding that. And I respect you highly. All right. Here's why I cannot follow what you have said. If you listen, I think, to your thinking and to what you're saying, you view God and religions as sort of a smorgasbord where you sort of pick and choose. You have great respect for Jesus. But the same Jesus who you have great respect for claimed to be God. So you choose to agree and accept something he says, but not other stuff.
I agree with how he led his life and maybe not necessarily everything he professed.
Right.
The way he treated people, the things he did, that is perfect.
Right.
But for him to say God, I didn't see him right. The historical evidence of the other things, they're less miraculous. Like, I don't necessarily believe in the miracles. I look at Jesus almost maybe allegorical in a way to say this is the way to lead your life, to live your life. But like miracles for me, I struggle with miracles being feasible compared to the alternative of people being wrong or it just being, embellished over 2,000 years,
Right. But you see, the reason that I can't follow that decision that you've made, the reason I can't make that decision is because Jesus, after giving these good ethical teachings, looked into the faces of his listeners and said, if you believe in me, you go to heaven. If you reject me, you go to hell.
Then he's a means to an end. And where's the ethics in following Jesus solely and fully with your heart if it's a means to an end of salvation?
No, wait a second. The point is, if he was lying, that turns him into one of the most crass manipulators imaginable. Imagine if you have a professor who teaches you great teachings all semester long, and then just before the final exam, he says, oh, by the way, you get below a 90, I will see to it that you get flunked out of this university. That dude's no good teacher. That dude's a crass manipulator. So if Jesus Christ gives all these great teachings about love and justice and honesty and faithfulness, and then he goes ahead and says, believe in me and you go to heaven, reject me and you go to hell. If he's speaking the truth, wow, I better trust in him. If he's not speaking the truth, I better not walk away saying, oh, he's a great teacher. No, the dude's a madman. He's a fanatic. He's an egomaniac. He's a crass manipulator.